Greetings! I am BlazeLeeDragon, and this is a video response to Mac. Now, Mac, I'm assuming that's how you say your name. I'm not going to read his entire message. It did say that you were interested in a response from me. Not necessarily a video response or a speedy response, but I'd like to give you a video response. And I'd like to give you a video response because I think this could apply to more than just you. I will leave out many of the personal details, just for the simple fact, confidentiality. You didn't necessarily say, whether or not you wanted most of it to kept back, but I'll keep some of it back. So, let's talk. First and foremost, let's talk about how the first question that you asked me, how do I feel about external, or as I refer to them, the others, etc., influences from beyond the veil? That is an excellent question, and honestly, I don't know if I can answer it straight up, just for the simple fact that there are differences in interpretation and interaction. Others, and for those of you who want to be a jackass and think of the Others movie, there's a reason that that movie was called The Others. Okay? So that's a pretty normal term for creatures of the other realms. Entities, deities, spirits, all of these are, other realm creatures. And the other realms and the veils, in my personal opinion, Mac, and experience, is that the other realmly creatures coexist with this realm, which is why I personally think that they use the term veil, because there's a very thin veil separating us from them. And on a whole, I don't think that there is as much interaction as I think people fear that there is. Now, for those of you that are freaking out and panicking of the thought of, other creatures existing side by side with us, walking among us, watching us, etc., do you not believe in fairies, dragons, angels, God, goddess, guardians, guides, etc., etc., etc.? Because all of these is exactly what we're talking about. And as far as the light and dark reference, yeah, I agree with what most people say, that there's not necessarily light or dark, just like people. Some people have maybe a darkness to them to a degree, but I don't consider darkness to be evil or negative. Well, negative maybe, but not negative in the sense of bad evil. Negative isn't a negative charge, and vice versa, positive charge for light, and too much of either can be bad. And if there's too much of extreme separation, just like lightning bolt, that'll exist if the charges are changed too much. There can be a big clash for balance to restore itself. So my personal thoughts with them is I think that it's fine to interact with them to a certain degree. And what I mean by that is, praying to your deities, asking your guides and guardians for help and assistance for the ones that are already there. Summoning creatures of other realms or interacting with them, particularly one of the most popular ones that is feared, and feared for good reason, demons, as well as trying to provoke ones, as an example, working with dragons. Usually dragons will have nothing to do with humans, and for those of you who think dragons are not real, they're just as real as angels or any of the other creatures that are not a physical substance. They just usually don't have anything to do with humans, because we're like flies to them as far as how long we live, and can interact with what they consider reality. Obviously, there's not really dragons of this physical reality other than some of the larger monitor lizards, such as the kimono dragon and the bearded dragon, but those are not the dragons I speak of. The dragons I speak of, usually the younger generation, will be guardians and guides, which is fine, but if you're going to seek them out and try to control them, you could have issues with them. You could also, same thing goes with interacting with angels or any other creatures. I personally am not comfortable with angels. I'm not comfortable with demons. I like spirit guides, I like some of them, but once again, it's just like people. If you invite someone into your home and they do not feel welcome, I would simply ask them to leave. Same thing applies to the spiritual realm. You also have to realize, too, if you're going to go bar hopping to pick up people, you're not necessarily going to meet your kind of people. Same thing spiritually, depending on how you invoke, evoke, summon, call upon, depending on how you do it, depends on what you might attract. So to speak, throwing the bait out there in a way. And I just think that interaction with the other realmly creatures should be limited to something of common sense, I suppose. If they can already achieve and touch this world and they're not harming you and they're around you and you can sense protection from them, I don't see a problem with interacting with them. I don't like the idea of invoking anything, even if it's simply, automatic writing. Makes me very uncomfortable. For those of you not familiar with that, that is where you allow your hand to kind of relax over a piece of paper with a pen or a pencil, and you allow, in essence, a spiritual entity to come into your hand and make your hand move. It is a very creepy and eerie feeling. It's like you've lost control of your hand to a degree, even though you can snatch it back. It's kind of like letting it fall asleep, so to speak, to where you're not controlling it, but then it starts twitching on its own. It's kind of like an involuntary muscle spasm. It's not very... Well, I guess everyone's going to have their own experiences with that and their own opinions. I'm just not a fan of it. The few interactions I've had with that are enough for me. So, that's my thought as far as the spirits, entities, deities, other realms. I think a certain amount of interaction is okay. Now, as far as you choosing not necessarily to trust them and some of the bad experiences you've been having, I don't want to share them on the video. Let's talk about that through email. I'll go ahead and respond, and I'll include a link to this video so that you can watch it, as well as communicate about your particular instances. I'd have to know a little bit more background and information of what's interfering with you in what fashion. For the most part, like I said, let's jump ahead. You were mentioning, do I know of any rules that, the other creatures would be bound by? Yes, absolutely. And it is very much based on the type of creature and the rules that they're bound by. But one pretty much universal rule is they hold no sway over the domain of the living. They can influence and interact with our world to a degree, but they have no sway over it. If you tell them to leave, they are required to leave. That mainly applies to spirits. Now, if you were to summon, open a gate, or bring in something a little bit more demonic, for lack of a better word, then they're not necessarily going to have to listen to what you say. So that's why you should be leery and not mess with that kind of stuff. Things like that is why the Christians get on their high horse. And I'm not picking on Christians, but Christians seem to be very anti-anything they consider to not be Christian, even though Christians do magic, which I'll get into in a later video. They get freaked out about the whole idea of demons and demonic stuff for good reason. There's a lot of fears and things in the past, and there's all sorts of creatures that might fall into the category of demonic. Even if they aren't demons, they could still fall into that category. And if you invite them into your home, it is very hard to get them to leave. Kind of like having termites in your woodwork in your home. It's very difficult to get rid of. So I'd have to talk about what specific type of interaction you're having, and I could possibly make suggestions of what I might do in that situation, and we can try to work through that. But on a whole, I'm kind of rereading your message to me again. Now, as far as you not choosing your path, it chose you. That's pretty normal. There's actually a saying in one of my books that those who are born a magician live as a magician. Those who take up the path of the magician that were not born to it will forever be unhappy and incomplete. And I think that's true to a certain degree. Some of us are just awakened and enlightened, and we just are. We're following the gifts that were intended for us. Some people are just born to play baseball, so to speak, and they're just incredible at it. And others just can't run to save their life. They can't hit the ball. Everyone's a little bit different. I personally disagree with what you're saying as far as once you start seeing them, they can see you. I think that the other realm creatures can see us regardless. I just think they take more note and notice of those of us who practice the arts, because we glow like beacons. Kind of like, just to be comical again, and to give me an excuse to bring back some of the voices, it's kind of like if you got into the woods. There's creatures all around. They might not see you. You might not see them, but they're there. Now, the ones that are big and noisy, such as those like us who practice the arts, are going to call a little bit more attention. It's kind of like fireflies. They light up. which in fact means they're horny and they're trying to, have sex. But it's completely neither here nor there. The point is, like fireflies, if you practice the arts, you're gonna glow in a way. And I think that draws more attention to you, makes you of more note. Same thing as if you walk down the street, you see a cat. Not a huge deal. If you saw a giraffe, it's going to call a little bit more attention. So I think the severity of the threat, or there you go, a cat versus a dog. Both are completely normal. The dog might draw more attention to you. If it's a growling dog, would draw even more attention. So if you put yourself at a situation to draw more attention from the other realms, and then you put yourself into a situation of being a threat to them, you might, invite violence in a way. So, but once again, I'm going to have to get a little bit more background and detail of what's going on to really give a good opinion. As far as your self-doubt, completely and utterly normal. We all face it. I face self-doubt. I face it fairly regularly. Everyone does. And it's not just in magic or spirituality. It's in all of life. Anybody who does anything is going to have some doubt in their, whatever it is, ability, faith, reason, background, anything. That's completely normal to have doubts. So I think I kind of touched upon everything that you've asked about, so I'm going to go ahead and shoot you an email and send you this as a message. I just wanted to do a video response, A, because they're fun to do, B, it's an excuse to break out my stupid voices, and C, I think others can learn from this as well. And these are just my opinions. You ask for my opinion, you're going to get it, whether you want to hear it or not. It's just, just the way I am. I like to make videos, so if you have, or anyone has any more questions, I will try to do more video responses and have more excuses to make more. So I believe I covered about everything. Talked about the rule type. Yeah. Most of the rules, let me touch a little bit more on the rules real quick. I think that was like your big question. And I think it's a good idea not to trust most of them. But at the same time, like I said, I have so much faith in my deities and stuff. I trust them completely. So I guess it depends on the interaction. Follow your gut instinct above all else. If it doesn't feel right, if your hairs are standing up on the back of your neck, something's wrong. If you're not having that and you feel comforted, maybe something's wrong. I mean, you have to trust your instincts. That's my biggest advice to anyone. Follow what feels right. I think innately all of us have the instincts to know what's right and what's wrong. As far as the rules that are binding, once again, I keep mentioning that, I'm going to come back to that, is I mentioned they don't have any sort of domain of the world of the living. And the reason you're not really finding a lot of rules in your research is when it comes to stuff a little heavy like this, it's very hard to find good books on it. Because A, most people don't know about it. B, most people are too scared to learn about it. And C, it's another realm. It's kind of like if you're trying to write a book about Japan, but you've never visited Japan. Now, granted, there's a lot of online research, but take away the internet and then try to write a book on Japan. It's very difficult because if you don't have a way to interact with it or at least see parts of it, books alone and pictures here and there and just a little bit of communication or calling on a telephone or watching the news or TV, it's just not enough. And that's the same way it is with the other realms. What they are bound by, depending on the entity itself, is going to vary. And it's going to be upon our observations. We're never going to know for sure. So it's going to be very, very hard to find information on that. The most helpful one, of course, being that they have no domain over the world of living. I'll say that a third time. That is a big deal. If you tell them to leave, they will leave. The exception to that is if you specifically invite, summon, open gate, etc. to get them here. Prime example, Necronomicon, not a book to play around with. One of the few books out there that actually has something that's real easy to get some real nasty stuff after you by using. The Necronomicon is a book that was written to be used as gateways between the other realms. And I've heard some of the individuals that follow the Necronomicon refer to themselves as necromancers. Necromancy, anything with mancy, is a type of divination. Necro meaning dead, so a type of dead divination or fortune telling. So it's summoning the spirits of the dead to interact with them to learn things. That's primarily what necromancy is. It's not necessarily what it is like in the video games where you raise an army of dead minions. A little bit different. However, my point with that is summoning stuff with the Necronomicon or through necromancy, bringing them here if you do not know what you're doing, you can cause greater harm than good, kind of like opening a kennel to some pit bulls that are not trained and that have been provoked into being violent, because pit bulls are usually sweethearts and very loving. But pit bulls can be also very vicious fighters if they're treated poorly. That's why they use them as fight dogs. They have the potential to be very vicious. So if you open a fight dog's pen, getting them back in is not that easy if you don't know what you're doing. Or if you think about people who do cruel animal cockfights, just like pit bull fights. If you pull out a fighting rooster and you don't know how to handle it, you're in for a world of hurt. Same thing applies to the spiritual realm. If you're opening gates and worlds and inviting, leaving your door unlocked and letting strangers come in off the street, you're gonna get yourself in trouble potentially. I'm not saying you did that. I'm just saying for audiences in general, be wary of this, be leery of this, and pay attention to what you're doing. Or above all, if you don't know what you're doing, don't do it. So that's my advice, that's my thoughts, that's my opinions. Take them or leave them, this is where they stand. So, with that being said, this is the end of this video, and I shall send an email response. Hopefully, by the voices I'm doing now, you can still understand what I'm saying. And if you can't, hopefully you can at least interpret what I'm saying. So, this is BlazeLeeDragon, wishing you bright blessings and a safe and fruitful spiritual adventure. I guess that's all. Odd and random thing.